the best way to place my fretting hand on the neck? Well, the answer to that is it entirely depends what I'm going to play. A lot of beginners gravitate to having their thumb over the top of the fretboard like this. Now that's fine if you intend to string bend, for example, if you're going to play some blues, as it acts as a nice little anchor point. And it's also useful if you intend to use your thumb to fret notes on the bass strings, like so. However, it does tend to make basic open chords a little bit difficult, and it tends to impair the sound somewhat. Let's say, for example, you're going to play an A major chord. We have a number of fingers all bunched up into the same place. You can hear that's not very clear. Or if you have fingers in front of one another, like a D major chord here, again it's thudding a little bit. And then when you have fingers spread out and one in front of another, like a C major chord, you can hear that's not very clear. And it's essentially, because of where my thumb is, it's dragging my fingers and flattening them towards the fretboard, which is impairing the clarity of what I'm trying to play. So the basic answer is, if you want your fingers to be longer, you need to drop your thumb. Now what I mean by that is, if I tip my guitar over a little bit, rather than having my thumb along the top edge of the fretboard, I'm going to move it more towards the middle of the back of the neck. If you play classical guitar, this is the grip that you're taught from the outset. But basically anywhere along there will be an improvement. What this does is it drops your palm and your heel away from the neck. You don't need to wrap your hand around it to keep the guitar still. The whole idea of keeping the guitar still is by trapping the guitar between your ribs and the forearm of your picking hand. So your fretting hand is purely about getting your fingers on the strings. It's not about gripping the neck to stop the guitar from wandering around. So by taking my thumb and moving it a little bit more around the back of the neck, that means I can roll my fingers up and onto their tips. By using their tips, they take up the least amount of room, which is extremely useful in a crunched up chord like an A. And also by using the tips, you get the most amount of pressure in the smallest area, which means you actually end up not squeezing half as hard as you think you have to, which means you can play for longer. The other thing to bear in mind as well is the heel of your hand. A lot of beginners bring the heel into the neck. So if I do that now, and now if I remove the neck of the guitar, look at the shape, look at what that's done to my hand. Now the issue here is the tendons that operate your fingers are now having to work through an angle. This means they're not going to work particularly well, and they're also going to rub against your wrist joint. Now, if you continue playing like that, you run the risk of repetitive strain injury, carpal tunnel syndrome, and even tendinitis. And in the most extreme cases, that can require surgery to correct. So things work a lot better the straighter they are from the elbow to the tips, like so. So if I pick the guitar back up again now. So to stop that heel from coming in, again, drop your thumb a little bit. That has the tendency to push the heel away. And another thing to bear in mind is where your elbow is. Again, what beginners tend to do is tuck their elbow into their ribs, which foreshortens your arm, and then you end up having to do that. So just make sure there's a little bit of a gap between your body and your elbow. Drop your thumb, and you should find things sound a lot clearer.